Now, we are here today to talk about your career, to talk about writing. We're also here to promote a little bit, so I'm looking forward to that, because you are working on this series for Valiant Comics, Rye, which has been, I think we're on issue 5 now, right?
Yes, we managed to get 5 out before the world changed, and
Yes.
we ended up fighting giant mutated scorpions in the wasteland of our civilization. Yeah.
Yes. I think I'd take scorpions at this point.
Yeah. Actually, it would be a refreshing change, to be honest.
Right? And yet completely unsurprising.
Yeah. Oh no, not at all. Yeah.
So yeah, man, big admirer of your work. I'm sure that our viewers at home are have their own particular favorite Abnett writing. So before we jump into it, I just wanted to say, what attracted you to the Rye project versus any other project that you could be working on at this moment in your career?
Well, obviously, it was enormous wads of money. Really, it was two things. And the first thing is the nicest thing that can happen to a freelancer, which was I was invited to do it. I was sitting there minding my own business one day, and I just got an email from Lisa, the editor, saying, "Would you be interested in doing this?" And I went, "That sounds very, very cool indeed." And so we started to have conversations. And so, when you get invited to do something, it's always very nice indeed. But also, I have worked for Valiant long ago in its previous incarnation, so I sort of was vaguely familiar with the core characters. And what I really like about the Valiant universe is the fact that it is a universe. It is a properly realized whole world. That works in a very different way to mentioning no names, but the big traditional superhero universes, of which there are two, and they're wonderful places to write in. Don't get me wrong, I love them, but they tend to work on the same kind of operatic scale. Valiant is very different. It has superheroes, but they are less obviously the costume type. There's a kind of realistic. I hate the word realistic. It's more sort of an authentic edge to them. I can believe in them. Really, really interesting stuff. I like Valiant's approach to storytelling. So it was like, a chance to work for Valiant again. That would be nice. So again, 2 plus points immediately going into it. And Liza had come to me really because of, I guess, my track record. Some might say police form sheet for writing cosmic science fiction stuff. Obviously, do that a lot for Marvel, DC, and for 2000 AD over here. So
exactly.
So yes, I do like my superheroes with a hint of sci-fi to them, and so that's what she come to me for. And there seemed vast potential in this particular thing. So the idea of Rye being this sort of semi-synthetic warrior, sort of 1,000 or so years in the future, 2,000 or so years in the future, with all sorts of interesting things, and also a legacy of continuity to build on, which is always nice to be able to connect it to that, but then open it out, because she has said this story will take place on a futuristic Earth, which we've said a lot about but never really properly shown in any great detail. So it is both locked into a continuity, which I always enjoy. That I love walking into somebody else's universe and seeing what sort of story I can tell there. But at the same time, there was plenty to explore, and that's one of the things we did in the first few issues, to try and imagine as much as possible, to go, this is the world we're playing with. So it was a win-win-win-win-win all the way across. And then once I started working on Rye, they said, actually, the story that sets this up is an event book called Fallen World. Do you fancy writing that as well? So I sort of retroactively went back and wrote that to lead into Rye, which was very useful, because it meant I could lay my own sort of foundation for where it went.
Sure.
So that was it. Yes, that's what attracted me to. I think I would have been. It's the sort of thing I'd pitch for anyway, because it's the sort of thing that appeals to me. But to have a door open and say, "What about this?" and you go, "Absolutely, I'm in." So
yeah, no, and it is a fascinating story. It's a lot of fun. The visuals are spectacular. The characters are engaging. Like it's a genuinely cool book to read. I loved the point you made, and I wanted to jump in on this because it dovetails nicely into the rest of the conversation. The fact that you said you actually enjoy working within continuity. There's so many creators out there who are like, yeah, continuity, it drives me crazy. I hate having to do all the research. But like, if you go back, and I'm talking more to the viewer than you necessarily, but like if you go back and look at Mr. Abnett's career, you can see you borrow. Now I'm talking to you. You borrow so much from the history. Like you clearly do the work. Like you put in the legwork. You understand where the world, like what world these characters live in, and what's happened to them, and who might be affected. Not only by the protagonist, but who has affected the protagonist within your story itself. And I think that's kind of like unique among celebrated authors like yourself. I love the fact that you actually enjoy working within continuity, or at least that you. Yeah,
I really do. I to be fair, I enjoy both. And when I get to work on I work when I'm working for 2008, for instance. Almost every strip I've written there, I've created, so it's made out of whole cloth. It may or may not have anything to do with anything else.
Right.
So the continuity and world building is mine to do. And I do that from time to time on other books because there is a genuine pleasure, obviously, in creating your own thing.
Sure.
But I also grew up reading, particularly Marvel, when I was a kid, and I loved the sense that was there even then, that they all shared a universe, and if something happened over here, it might be important over here. And I've always enjoyed that, and I think that that's a pleasure that I got as a reader then. I think it's a pleasure that readers get now. It explains, for instance, I think one of the key reasons the phenomenon of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is because there is a sense of a connection. It's not just they're all happening in the same place. There is a genuine sense of connection on both a macro and micro level. Yeah. And when you pay attention to that, it is rewarding. It's rewarding for a creator, and it's rewarding for the viewer or reader or whatever. So I don't hate it. I will happily do either, but I know there are some people who go, oh gosh, if it's not my story, or I'm too constrained. And by the way, it can drive you absolutely mad. There have been occasions, in otherwise very happy circumstances, working for the big two, working for many companies, where you're participating in a crossover, or you're just writing a book that's suddenly been drastically affected by what something else is doing, and you can end up going bananas about it and saying very rude things about people. But even so, that's also part of the challenge. It's part of the. I always got the impression that back in the late 60s, early 70s, for instance, the people who worked in the Marvel bullpen, as an example, were kind of like soldiers in the trenches. Whoever needed to do what was needed to do next, they would do it. I need a cover. Somebody needs to write the next issue of this because I can't. Oh, I'll do it. Okay. And I think that's part of the kind of collective team spirit of comics, because it is a team sport. You're there working with an artist, an inker, letterer, colorist, editor. It is a team sport. So to have that, extend that team sport into the sort of the way that the publishing house works and how different books work alongside each other, I think is fun. So I've always been willing to do that. I've actually always sort of put my hand up and said, I will happily write the Phil issue. That it's not going to be the most sort of illustrious thing for me to write an issue or two between famous runs by this person before setting, but it's a great thing to do, and it's writing comics. It's an opportunity to write characters. One of the reasons I've played with so many different characters over the years, I think, is that willingness to dip in and say, what can I do with this? I also started, God, I'm talking a lot. I also started my career back in the 1550s. No, a long time ago. My first job was at Marvel UK's division in London, where I was a junior editor, and almost everything we published in the UK was licensed material. So I spent a long time working on the real Ghostbusters and Action Force and Thundercats and Transformers and Care Bears and Thomas the Tank Engine and all these licensed products. Yeah. So that was my first experience of actually both editing and writing professionally. And I learned pretty fast that the way you got the job done efficiently was to make sure you didn't break the toys and break the rules. You'd look at the style guide that the licensing company had sent to you, and you understood what sort of story they wanted. And therefore, it gave you a sort of target to aim at. And to me, the trick wasn't like, what sort of story can I knock off in this comparatively limited space? It's like, what's the best story I can tell that will hit that target? Right. And that, I think, was fundamentally important to me as a writer, because I sort of then brought that with me when you go to much, the Marvel universe, for instance, or the DC universe is a much, much bigger place. Where there is much more room for the variety of exploration in terms of story. Nevertheless, there are still those rules. There are still things that could happen and definitely wouldn't happen.
Right.
And I think that training really sort of stood me in good stead for that I wasn't going, oh, I'm getting frustrated, I can't do this thing. Whereas in fact, actually, it was getting much more excited about finding the thing that I could do. That applies to Valiant, and that applies to the other things I do when I'm wearing my other hat as a novelist and writing for, say, the Warhammer universe.
Exactly.
Who, you know, I have in Warhammer, I've sort of chiseled out my own little corner of the Warhammer universe where I sort of set the rules. I've done vast amounts of world building. Nevertheless, it's someone else's universe, and there are ultimate cosmological rules that I have to obey. And I've never felt. I think you only feel trapped if you decide you're trapped.
Right.
Wow. That was pretty fun for a Monday afternoon.
Yeah. Hey, we really got deep here.
That was kind of a metaphorical comment on the whole lockdown quarantine thing, clearly.
Yeah. I mean, but we are trapped, though.
Yeah, we are trapped. No, completely trapped.
Yeah, it's funny because I've always maintained, and I think that, and I'm not the only one to say this, but like the fact that editorial mandate seems to be this thing that everybody's railing against, and because everyone needs a suit to be upset with or to have a villain to fight. But I think that editorial restraint is a wonderful tool to allow artists to be more adaptive and creative. It kind of gives them the restrictions that they need to go, oh, I only have this box. How can I creatively get out of the box? You know, that kind of thing, as opposed to being like, do whatever you want. It's like being in school and them handing you your essay and being like, you can write about whatever you want. Yeah. And you're like, well, what the hell? The universe is vast. How do I start?
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. The only times I've sort of created my own things, really, is when I've had an idea and thought, oh, that will be a thing, and I can't fit it somewhere, so I'm going to have to create my own thing.
Right.
But somebody says, do anything you want. I think you spend the first sort of week sitting there going, what is the thing I want to do, and what?
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's there's too much freedom, and I think there are occasions where you'll get literal logistical problems in a company-wide line where someone forgets to tell somebody that something is happening, or and there's a whole knock-on effect, and that can be disastrous. It was actually very, very funny, and I won't go into the details, but 2 years ago, I've been working for DC a lot. Something happened at DC where one book was doing something, thinking that everybody knew what they were doing, and nobody did. And at an editorial retreat with everyone present, all the writers, we were all standing up in turn to say what we were doing in our book. And I won't mention his name, but it was Tom King, stood up and said, "I'm doing this, and I'm not sure how much swearing I'm allowed to do on this."
Oh, yeah, no, you're fine.
There was you could almost see the shockwaves going out across the room as editors going, "You're doing what?" And me and the writers of several other books that had characters in common went, "Hey, no, what?" And it was just, but once we realised that it was genuinely a mistake, it was an oversight. We hadn't been told. He thought we'd been told. He thought it was all. We just sat at the bar and we worked out how to do it. And actually, it meant that all the things I was doing in my book, I literally couldn't do. So I decided that I would do them anyway, but I would turn them on their head. I literally inverted the entire story for it being about, rather than it hanging on a particular character, it was like, what happens if this character isn't here? It's still the same story, but it was like, oh my God, this character isn't around, and he should be, really, and he should have been, really, because it was a story about him, but I'd removed him. And actually it worked, oddly, it sort of worked better. So you adaptive, you find ways of solving your problems, and it can be very funny. Or they let you get on with this stuff. I mean, when I was working on Guardians of the Galaxy, for Marvel, a staggeringly long time ago that was as well. But the characters I wanted to use were the ones that I remembered reading as a kid in the UK. There was a lot of reprint stuff over here, and so it was characters like Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon, who I liked, and I knew that they had never really been massively successful. They were sort of the forgotten toys down the back of the toy box. What I wanted to do was to sort of find the potential in them, mainly by combining them, like putting Rocket and Groot together and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And for a brief sort of, I don't know, 6 months to a year on that book, it was just wonderful, because Marvel honestly didn't care what I did, because as far as they were concerned, these toys were already broken.
Yes.
I think there was an enormous amount of freedom in doing storylines that I'd been writing, a major character like, I don't know, Spider-Man or Iron Man or something like that, I simply wouldn't have done, because you can't do that with something that's established.
It's too high profile.
Because there were no, sort of in that little corner of the universe, there were no rules. I sort of made my own. And Joe Quesada was not a fan of cosmic stories. He didn't understand why people like cosmic stories. So he would constantly say, I just don't get it. But carry on doing it. You just keep doing it, but I don't get it. And I think that's one of the reasons to the extent that it worked simply because there was an opportunity to kind of play around, and nobody, if I suddenly went, oh, I've broken this one, nobody was going to go, what have you done? You've just destroyed a multi-million-pound franchise.
Right.
It's like, I'll just put it back in the toy box. No one will notice. So yeah, you can. I think being part of a big universe is great because there is an enormous amount of story resonance that you can get out of that. The fact that you can reflect events in other books, or other books can reflect the events in your book. The trick is, I suppose, is in a sneaky way, is also to build your own bubble, where if you need to, you can ignore the outside and you can stick to your story and just concentrate on that. So there's all sorts of cunning little techniques behind the scenes that the reader's not necessarily aware of, where you kind of like, I'm going to really pay attention to that because that's important, but I'm going to just ignore that that's happening because I don't need to know that.
Right. Or they're subconsciously aware of it.
Yeah.
Playing to your Guardians and Annihilation event, that was a whole thing that could upturn the galaxy, yet at that tumultuous time in the Marvel Universe, you had Civil War, and yet you were able to do so much with so much that, again, didn't have any effect on what clearly the bigwigs over there were more focused on.
Yeah, and that's right, because I mean, in the Marvel universe, Earth is the important place because that actually is the prime real estate where all the characters are. That's the bit that really matters.
Yeah,
but space doesn't matter because it's quite hard to identify with some mumble jumble planet out in the middle of nowhere. Sort of all this kind of stuff. We could play around with all sorts of different things and do the sort of Titanic scale things that you couldn't do on Earth without breaking Earth. Right. Which was very, very useful. And to me, Annihilation, which Keith Giffen masterminded the first one of those, that was great because we could work on that kind of Star Warsian scale, which was fantastic. But to me, the moment I realised that something was happening that made a big difference is having done the Nova miniseries for the first Annihilation, which was beautifully drawn and it was a good story and people really liked it and blah 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 blah. The thing was a success. But then they said we want to launch a Nova ongoing, and in the first couple of issues I had him return to Earth and interact with the Earth heroes.
Yes.
And that was to me that was the turning point that made everybody go, wait a minute, this is really, really cool, because he as a character had changed. And he basically been aware that he was a slightly crap third-rate Marvel hero, but he was returning to Earth, sort of as powerful as anybody, and with that recognition of having done something. And you had characters like Iron Man reacting to him, going, "Wait a minute, you're not the Nova that I thought you." And suddenly, what the reader and the audiences were thinking about Nova, the comic book character, he was thinking about himself in the book, and there was a point of recognition. And taking him back to Earth and showing him side by side with that made the difference in terms. And from that point on, it was sort of really, really began to take off. So yeah, I think there's the you can go out into space or into the realms of fantasy to do big things, and they can be huge and still be separate from Earth. But when you go back to Earth, it allows you to focus on who that person is and where their place is now in the firmament.
It's funny because apropos of the Nova series, when he goes to Earth, you're so excited because he's finally you're going to show the change this character has gone through. And the second he's there, you want him to leave immediately. You're like, oh, I don't want him anywhere near this place. It's like he's outgrown it.
Yes.
I think that growth and that change in that character is so rare, within the confines of that kind of universe. To have a character actually go through a significant arc and actually shift and grow and change and advance, that readers were so shocked by it, maybe subconsciously, that it's why people love Richard Rider so much. It's a testament to that series, and it's why people keep 10 years later, people are still like, hey, when are we going to get Richard Rider? When are we going to get more Richard Rider series? And it's like it without the growth, they wouldn't care, but it's all there.
I think so. I think that applies across the board. Is that if you move from the very big to the very small, if you go from space to Earth or from the past to the future, or any of those kind of transitions that happens all the time in comics, it's always interesting to see what has changed whilst you've been away, either in the things that you left behind or indeed in you, the character, when coming back to that. And I think that even with the Valiant stuff, I mean, obviously with Rye, we are building this new world.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've tried quite carefully to do is to place within it elements that are recognisably the Valiant universe, but they have changed since you last saw them, which was best part of 2 millennia ago. And I think that works really, really well. It's not a sort of deliberately kind of what if or, you know, sort of futuristic version. It's just like, this is where this has ended up, and it might not be quite what you're expecting. And I think that sort of, you can create the most fanciful and vividly fantastical world, but if you put enough those few little reminders, touchstones of things that are familiar, it grounds the reader and makes them identify with that world and those characters even more.
Absolutely. I think it also raises the stakes. It gives them something to acclimate themselves and say, oh, like, this is affecting the world I'm familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested in this Rye series and you want to see it progress, you need to pre-order the book. If you want to see this book
continue. We went into hiatus, obviously, after 5 issues. I have to say, and I people say that, like, this sort of thing in podcasts and interviews all the time, but I'm going to say it anyway because I really mean it. I love this book. You know, it was a very nice thing to be invited to do. And as ever, I tried to do my best possible job with it. But I have come to love this book so much. I love writing it. I think the characters are great. Juanjo, the artist, is just doing the most unbelievably good work, yes, which then drives me to sort of strive harder with the scripts. It's all very well saying, "Oh, create a fantastical world," and I could come up with great ideas, and that script could go to a great artist. But if you know, it could end up looking flat or having that sense, you know, why the reader going, why do I really care? Oh, it's an amazing city or whatever, you know, fantastic. Sure. So many times before. But he really gets it. He kind of bought into it alongside me, and he's got this extraordinary. Not only is his storytelling great, so there's the most amazing choreography of fights and then character acting and stuff like that. But this amazing sense of authentic detail, which is the thing that just blew me away the first time I saw his pages, which means that when I invent something and then he finesses it and visualizes it, it seems real, completely real. So even the most mundane, and not boring, but the most mundane element of the world is quite fascinating to look at. Yeah. So it means that my storytelling can have a much greater range of mood, because it doesn't, not everything has to be loud and explosive all the time to capture attention. He can do something very quiet and it be completely captivating because you completely believe this is a real world, and that to me is the clincher. So like I said, I love this book. I hope people continue to read it, and I hope my stories are good enough. But the most important thing is people should be looking at this because of the quality of the art. And as you said, because of the hiatus, we've got 5 issues out. Issue 6 is out in August. And therefore it needs to be pre-ordered through your comic shop now if you want to get it, and we hope people will, because we hope we can get everybody to get back on the train having got them off the train. But at the same time, the trade paperback of the first 5 issues is at the same time, so you can pre-order that as well, and you get your instant catch up, and it's worth it because, just as I say, it looks so gorgeous, and it's a perfect primer for where we go in issue 6, which is the start of a new arc.
It is, and I hope you don't mind my saying, because of my access, I was able to have a peek at issue 6, and I can say it is. If you didn't think it got wild enough, it gets more wild. Yeah. Check it out. But pre-ordering is a frustrating and fascinating thing, because, like, you know, if you want a movie to do well, you go see it opening day. If you want a song to do well, you pick it up when it's available. With a comic book, if you want it to do well, you need to call your local comic book store.
Yes.
And tell them you would like it. Have them reserve a copy for you, because they have to pre-order the amount of legwork for comics successes is, you know, comparatively speaking, almost like too much. Because
it is a hugely complicated business, really, and it is. And there is no shortcut, because the comics industry is what the comics industry is. It's the way it's evolved. It is magnificently a sort of a global network of basically independent retailers.
Yeah.
And the only way to get them in line is to make the distribution work sort of in a kind of uniform way, which means advance notice. Otherwise, we get 47 million copies of something that nobody wants to read, and then no copies at all of something that people really do want to read. So it's the only way to to make sure, and that is true month to month under the best of circumstances. We've just gone through something that is really quite unusual circumstances, and as I said, it's like all the clocks have stopped, all the trains have stopped, all the buses have stopped running. In order to get them rolling again, we really need to sort of give them a little shove to get the engines going. So where I'd normally say pop into your comic shop and get them to reserve your copy or pick up a copy or maybe order it from whatever. Right now, it's like, no, go and get this now, because this is a great opportunity to keep these. Because a lot of books, I think, are just going to die because nobody has been, nobody will be looking at them. But good and bad, big selling books, they're just going to disappear, and some of the shops are going to do that too. So I think if you are a comics fan of Valiant, of Rye, of anything, if you're a comics fan, and you want to make sure that things keep rolling along and improve, then there are active things you can do. And the simplest thing to do is to have a look at what's going to be out there soon. Contact your local comic shop, order some stuff up, get back into the swing of things. Because every company, in very different ways, but every company is trying to do its best to get their books to you somehow.
Yes.
And that's, and like I said, it would just be a terrible, terrible shame for so many of these good things. And it's going to be the less well-known things. It's not going to be the mainstay characters, because the mainstay characters will survive because they have an iconic life beyond the comics themselves. But it is things like Rye that, I hope a good comic that people are going to go, well, I'd never heard of it, so why would I even go, and that's going to be the case with so many hundreds of really great comics that need the support.
Well, and if you want books like those, because the while the burden of responsibility is on the reader to know the industry enough to pre-order their books and keep them alive, the market and the publishers are aware of trends and are monitoring it. And so when a book does poorly, they can then add that to their lexicon, where they're like, this is a book that has this criteria that did not succeed, and therefore we're not going to make more books like that.
Yes. And I think it's the legacy of that, actually, absolutely, that gave rise to Joe Quesada's completely understandable comment about not getting Cosmic in
because they didn't sell.
Because traditionally it hadn't sold, and why would anybody want to try to do that? And so yes, and to be entirely fair, one of the reasons I enjoy writing Rye as well is that it's a very welcome change of pace to what I'm doing for other companies. I mean, I have loved, over the last couple of years, I've been writing Justice League Odyssey for DC, entrusted with some big characters. It's been great. It's cosmic, but it's like, this is a big DC book, and that's great. This Rye isn't, and therefore all the story ideas and things that don't fit into the mainstream DC universe go here. And it's kind of like, it's like mental health. You do one, and that was great, but intense work, and then you go, and they're a contrast. And I think the same is true of readers. Readers might love reading, Spider-Man and Batman and stuff like that, but I think that it would be nice, and I think they probably crave to read something that absolutely isn't that, for which they have no expectations, for which they have no preconceived ideas about what it should or shouldn't be, and try something completely new. And there's lots of good stuff like that, but obviously Rye's the best.
Obviously. Now, you have a predilection, it seems, for the cosmic, for space, for the fantastic. What about that element speaks to you, or is it just that you happened to end up like, oh, just consistently speaking, I happen to be in outer space most of the time?
Well, I don't know. I have always liked SF generally, although I see science fiction as a very sort of broad church that goes across right into realms of fantasy and sword and sorcery, and also into very contemporary stuff that isn't apparently science fiction, but really is,
right?
Speculative and stuff like that. So it's a very wide-ranging thing. I do think, obviously, I'm British, and I think that we don't have to anything like the same level. We do have it, but we don't have it to the same level. A tradition of costumed superheroes as being our mainstream. We have a much greater bias towards either science fiction heroes, Judge Dredd, that kind of thing, Dan Dare, or to sort of real world action and adventure heroes, which was the mainstay of the comics industry in the UK for years and years and years. Yeah. So I think I grew up reading those sorts of things. And I remember vividly reading my first American superhero comics and going, what the hell is this? Loving it, but just going, I have no frame of reference to what this is. It's a very strange thing. So I think I carry those things with me. I have no problems at all writing any. I mean, I'll happily write a sort of vigilante superhero. Great. It doesn't have to be in space or any of those sorts of things. But I have no problem at all writing a superhero character because I completely am in that mindset. But at the same time, sometimes I look at a superhero, the American mainstream superhero, and go, it's a bit weird that guy's just wearing a cat suit and he's running around. It's a bit strange. Does he have to? So to me, the cosmic superheroes in what we might describe as the American sense, Nova, Guardians of the Galaxy, that sort of thing, Justice League Odyssey, to me, they're not wearing costumes.
It's like
they're wearing uniforms.
Yeah.
Or they're wearing whatever apparatus they need to survive in an alien environment.
And it happens to look.
Yeah. It happens to have. It's got emblems and icons and stuff like that. And to me, that once you do that, you're going, wait a minute, that's all working for me now. It's sort of Green Lantern's costume is no more a costume than Dan Dare's spacesuit or Judge Dredd's uniform of office. And once you've got that in your head, so I think it ties into a particularly British way of looking at it. The sort of genre influences that we're exposed to over here, or were, certainly not so much now because it is global and universal. And I think it's also got a bit of, I think you can get into areas of, dare I say, sort of satire and politics because it's in space that you couldn't do in a real world story. And almost do it without, not because I desperately want to, sort of make some political manifesto, but you can talk about these sorts of things without risk of kind of offending anybody or mucking about with you. You can just explore something.
Sure.
Without sort of immediately alienating half of your audience or whatever.
It's the Star Trek effect. Like everyone likes.
Precisely. Yes. Yeah.
Everyone likes these characters.
I grew up watching Star Trek. I grew up watching Doctor Who. So that's I'm very used to seeing those sort of forms of presentation for really interesting ideas and stories. Yet they somehow were completely made up.
Right. Apropos of science fiction, I wanted to ask this is more for me than it is for the audience, but you're welcome to come along. When during the Rebirth panel at WonderCon, going back a ways, you were part of that collective of creators that they paraded on stage and said, "Look at what we're going to do!" And you were on Aquaman, amazing book by the way, great stuff, but also completely different. Another one of those titles. It's like it's not space, it's not. But it is kind of, it is otherworldly, right? Because the book is,
to me, it's cosmic. It falls under the same category because it's it's an alien society with alien ways of doing things. But yes, I take your point absolutely. Yeah. But
the blend and the kind of like door kicking of the opening of like, no, we're gonna deal with the Atlantis human like Earth surface world right now. We're gonna deal with that right now. Great stuff. But I got a chance to talk to you one-on-one, and I said, thanks a lot for Terminator, the old book from God knows what publisher that was when it was out.
Yes,
right? Was it Malibu?
Yes, I think it was. I keep wanting to say Dark Horse, but I don't think they had the license at the time.
They didn't have it back then. Well, they had another Terminator license. This was Terminator 2.
Yes.
Cybernetic Dawn.
Cybernetic Dawn, yes. Yeah.
Can you, because I have you here, can you tell me what were the origins of that project, and did you have fun doing a Terminator story?
I'll answer the second part first. Yes, of course I did, because it's Terminator, and that was great. I've been lucky enough to write things like Terminator and Predator and Alien, and get a huge kick out of those because they were very, very formative experiences to my teenage cinema going. And Terminator 2, marvelous film, but I still prefer the original.
Really?
There is such a purity to that first film, and I saw it. I remember seeing Terminator when it first came out. It must have been December over here. I can't remember exactly the time of year, but I know it was snowing, and it was me and my friend, and we were teenagers, and we wanted to do something, and there was nothing to do because there was nowhere to go. So we walked to the cinema to see whatever they were showing, and we hadn't even heard of the film. We knew nothing about the film, and there was like three choices. and whatever the other, I can't even remember what the other two were. We didn't appeal to us, and there was a film called The Terminator. We went, oh, it's Arnie. Oh, all right then. And we were the only two people in a 500-seat cinema watching a film that we were completely unprepared for. And we sat there and we came out going, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, what I love about the original film, and it's true of the second film. The second film does the same thing, bigger with a bigger budget. But the first film has got this extraordinarily brilliant, simple logic running through it. And the best moment to me is the moment where she goes into the nightclub because she knows she's being chased.
Yes.
And she contacts the police and they tell her to stay put in the public place. In other words, she does all the things that people in other films never do and get into trouble. But she still gets into trouble. And I thought that was a magnificent sort of acknowledgement of the tropes of cinema. The fact that you could still get great drama and action out of somebody being sensible.
Yes.
So I loved it. So being asked to do the comic was great. But to answer the first part of your question is, given that I can't really remember the publisher, how I ended up doing it is beyond me. But I do remember that I really enjoyed doing that. As I say, there is that those sort of big action franchises. I mentioned just now working on Aliens, particularly when I worked on the Alien Isolation game.
Yes.
Which was I couldn't believe that I was getting to play with these things, and that's great. So
it was for me, Alien Isolation. The fact that when I saw your name on the screen, we're playing the game. I see your name written by Dan Abnett, and I'm like, how often is it that such a logical thing occurs where not to stroke your ego in any way, but call Dan Abnett to do a friggin' Alien sequel, video game, movie, doesn't matter, but he'll nail it. and you did, and it's so compelling. It was a story okay, so with Alien Isolation, since we're moving over to there a little bit,
sure.
How much direction did you have versus when they walk me through it? Did they call you? Did you call them?
Again, this is another example of an invitation that they actually made by a games company that is about an hour's drive away from where I am.
Yeah. And
I got this email out of the blue saying we'd be interested, and I do quite a lot of game work, but I'm not a gamer. Simply because if I know my own personality, if I started playing games, I would never get any work done. So I've done various bits and pieces. I also worked on things like the Shadow of Mordor games. I'm working on some games at the moment.
Yeah.
And I always go in there as the sort of the idiot who comes in and knows nothing about what's going on and therefore asks all the stupid questions. And sometimes that's really useful because people do things in certain ways just because they've always done it that way. And because somebody's asking them why they do it, it's sometimes not often, most of the time I just look like an idiot, but occasionally me asking the stupid question was useful. But with that, they said, would you like to come and write this? We want this game to work, and would you be interested? And I said, I don't know anything about games, and said, that's not why we're asking you. We're asking you because you tell stories, and what we need is a story. And that was literally the case, because they had decided that they had the chance to do an official sequel to the original film.
Yes.
And almost every game that had come out had been a sequel, as it were, to Aliens, which is also a great film. But it had therefore been shoot 'em up. It had been about colonial marines. It had been about the action orientation of these things, for better or for worse. Some are better than others.
Agreed.
But this is the first time anybody had gone back to the essence of the original, which is not an action film. It's a survival horror story. Yeah. It's a haunted house story, and it's about claustrophobia and scares rather than action. And they were already building this ship, which was essentially identical to the Nostromo, as an environment. And I was amazed. And they say, yeah, we know what it looks like, and we know what the game experience should be. It's like basically you've got to sneak around and try not to die.
Right.
And the alien is driven by the game's AI, so it will pop up in all sorts of unexpected places. And it's about hiding and being quiet. And you haven't got a weapon. And it's going to be terrifying. And it genuinely is terrifying. The very funny stories of watching game reviewers come in to play the sample, sort of 20 minutes of it, and freaking out because it was so scary. Yeah. But literally they said, but we want a context for why this is happening. Look, we're already building it and we can do this, but why is it happening? And who's involved? And blah, blah, blah. And that was where, so it was the story part of me and that they were getting. And we had a great team working there. And sometimes we would say, we think the story should do this, so they would build the relevant bit for it to occur in. And sometimes I say, we've built this brilliant thing. Put that in the story. And we go, okay. But yeah, it was a very enjoyable experience.
Now, personally, was it when they said, we want you to do a sequel to the original Alien? Was it like, okay, I'm gonna have to like rack my brain? Or was it like, okay, well, hang on one second, let me just get the script I clearly wrote when I was inspired, because I feel like there's no way you're not a fan of the original Alien, and that it didn't.
Yeah. No, yes, I didn't have a one I prepared earlier to pull out, but I did. It was. I think there is a great purity to the films,
yes,
and therefore the core strengths and the core themes are quite easy to tease out. And you go, well, I need to do something that's got this in it, and I need these sorts of characters, and so it sort of assembled itself pretty rapidly. It was the fine tuning that took months and months and months, and writing all the dialogue and the copy for the be hidden away in places. Yeah. But it was but there was massive pressure, because this was not a cheap game to make. It's an iconic movie that the last thing we wanted to do was do something that let it down. Plus it was the what it would have been. It would have been the 40th, 30th, 35th.
Yeah,
of lockdown. But it was a major anniversary of the movie. Yeah. And so one of the things that 20th Century Fox wanted to do was to release the game to celebrate this massive anniversary of the classic film that was now in their classic ball with classic written all over it, and promoted it as a classic movie from classic. And it was like classics. And it was, so at one point I remember an executive telling me that they'd seen the game. They said the game is spectacular. It's really, really good. It's really good. There was no denying the quality of the animation and the construction of that. They basically said because of the scrutiny that's on it, because of what that film is, what that franchise is, and what the year is in terms of its anniversary, the game needs to be better than just good. It's got to be better than it needs to be, because it's like, okay then.
No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Oh, man. Was there any resistance to bringing in Amanda?
Surprisingly not, or certainly not that I was aware of. Certainly not that I was aware of. I think we wanted to do it. And weirdly, I think one of the extras that you could, but that was actually the biggest treat to me. One of the extras that you could play was just a playable version of the same environment, where you could play the original characters in the film.
That's what I did. Yeah, I have that. That's great.
And so they said we'll do that. And it doesn't have to be part of the story. It's simply this adjunct where, just for the fun of it, because seeing as we built this thing, you can actually play. Yeah, and they said, can you write some dialogue for those characters? And I went, oh great. So all these classic characters from the film. And I said, who are you going to get to play these characters? And they went, well, the actors. And I realised I was writing dialogue for Sigourney Weaver, and I was So I had to have a sit down on the couch and smelling salts at that point.
That's amazing, man. So yeah, I don't know. You kind of nailed all the things. You nailed it, because I was going to go from Terminator to Alien Isolation. So I was like, okay, well, no, we did that. I feel like at this point, there seems to be a little bit of a continuity where people ask you now, hey, do you want to do this? Is there a franchise or a universe that you have not played in yet that you're like, I'm just waiting for the call?
Yes. Funnily enough, I was at a signing once, and somebody was asking me this question about, do you not find it weird? Because let me start again. I write comics, I write novels, and from time to time I also write games. And the way I do that, and I'm notoriously prolific. I make no apologies for that. But the reason that I am is because I actually think I do my best work when I've got some pressure of slightly too much to do. If you said you've got 3 years to write something of your own invention, I would never get anywhere with it. So I've always got things on the go. And the way I keep those plates spinning is that I literally move in the course of a day between one thing and another. So I might get up in the morning and I write a chapter of my latest novel. It's usually Warhammer, but it could be Doctor, it could be anything. And then I might move on in the afternoon to comic scripting, and the following day I might do a bit of the game, and then it might be something for 2000 AD, and then it might be back to DC, and then it might be Valiant, So I move around. And people often go, well, I couldn't do that. A lot of writers have to do one project until it's finished.
Sure.
But somebody said did I find that difficult? And I said, no, I don't. But then I've been doing it for a long time, so I've probably learned how to cope with that. But I actually find that I not only do I do my best work if I'm under pressure, I also do my best work if I remain fresh. And if you write anything, no matter how much you love it, if you stay somewhere on something for too long, you can get stuck on it. So in the course of a week, I'll do many, many different things. And the way I described this was to say, I don't like to stay in the same universe for too long. Which I am aware made me sound like a Time Lord and not a comic book writer. So I meant it. So I always do that. So I have, there are very few sort of franchises in comics and stuff like that I haven't written one way or another. But it got to the point where people said, "What have you written?" And I said, "It's easy to tell you. I have never written The Simpsons in any form, not even in comic book form." So there's that one in terms of big global franchises. But the one to answer your question is Star Wars. I've written Doctor Who, I've written Star Trek, I've written Battlestar Galactica, but I've never written Star Wars, and Star Wars is very, very, very dear to me. So if anybody from, the great thing that is Star Wars is out there that fancies me doing some of that, I would love to. It's not a case of finally ticking the last thing off a bucket list or anything like that, but it really is. It's always been that elusive thing.
So, that's shocking that you have. Like once you said it, I was like, "Oh, that's right. You've never." Written
I'm
Star
shocked,
Wars.
and weirdly, there would be it would beautifully like coming home because when I was reading comics as a kid, before I even knew I would end up in the industry, I read the British Marvel weekly comics. And for those of you in America and elsewhere who don't know, Marvel comics in Britain that were published over here were published weekly. In magazine size, so they were big. They were much bigger than the US format. They would be published in black and white, and they would be anthologies. So I used to read for a long time. I read a comic called Mighty World of Marvel, and every week it would have like 5 pages of the Avengers, 5 pages of Daredevil, 5 pages of Doctor Strange, and 5 pages, I think, of the Hulk. And they were American things from about 4 or 5 years before. They were cut up and they were serialized in the course of the month, often with new splash pages drawn on by British artists. It's the weirdest way of presenting stuff. That's what I was used to. When I suddenly saw American Marvel, I went, wait a minute, this goes on for 20 pages? What's it? It's in colour? What's wrong with this size? It didn't make any sense. But anyway, I would read the Marvel. That's how I got to read the 1960s stories when they were republished in the UK in the 70s and had that grounding in these characters.
Yeah.
But when Star Wars came out, British Marvel did a reprint of the American Marvel Star Wars comic, obviously. Of course they would. It was the biggest thing in the world. And it was Star Wars Weekly, which was, again, big size. And it serialized all the Marvel Star Wars comics in black and white. But it had to have backups. And it was those backups where they'd gone to the archives to find any previously published Marvel material that had a science fiction element to it. That's how I read Star-Lord. That's how I read Rocket Raccoon, The Sword and the Star, Gulliver on Mars, all sorts of things. All of those things which would run as a backup, not because they were, for want of a better word, good, but because they could be put into a magazine called Star Wars, and it wouldn't be like, why have you got Daredevil and Iron Man in Star Wars?
Right.
But to me, these were a revelation. I'd never read anything like it. I thought they were absolutely brilliant. And it was my enthusiasm for the characters I read as backups in a black and white weekly reprint in the 70s that led me to Guardians of the Galaxy. That's why I knew those characters. That's where I'd come across those characters. And so I have, quite apart from the fact that I love Star Wars, I feel a sort of creative debt to that sort of slightly shabby black and white reprint Star Wars comic that I loved when I was a kid. Came with a free cardboard make your own paper airplane X-wing in the first issue. I remember that.
That's cool.
So that's the other reason. It would be like coming full circle, because it's like Star Wars, just in terms of the level and scale of its imagination, has influenced. So it is one of those. Clearly, it's one of those films, along with things like Blade Runner and Alien, that had and Mad Max and The Matrix, that had a huge impression on the way we thought science fiction should look.
Yeah.
So it would be great. I just think it's been in my creative DNA since I was small, and it would be nice to actually channel that for a change.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a great idea. I just wanted to wrap up a little bit with a question, because we finally got to see at least some element of Rocket's costume from your run in Endgame.
Yes.
How fun, not only just that, but like, how fun was it? Like, your Guardians of the Galaxy run is why Rocket and Groot are in those movies.
Yeah. Yes, it was very weird. It was very weird to spend a couple of years writing a comic that I liked writing, and
the editor-in-chief didn't give a shit about. Like,
and nobody gave a shit about, and it was full of characters nobody had ever heard of, really, unless you were a really diehard fan or you happened to create it sort of 15 years earlier.
Right.
And then to go from that to a point where suddenly I would go out of my front door and walk down the street, and there'd be kids going to school with a Rocket Raccoon lunch pail or whatever, and go, that's weird. And I don't take full credit or responsibility for that either, because obviously the movie made all the difference. But when I was told they were making the movie, I, like everybody at Marvel, went, they're doing what now?
Right.
You know, and clearly they wanted to do a Star Warsian scale thing and try something in outer space. And I think they also wanted to try something that wasn't previously well known to see how that would work.
Yeah.
But yeah, the movies, and I, because obviously there've been the two Guardians movies, and then the Guardians are in the two Avengers movies, and also Thor Ragnarok borrows from some of those ideas as well. So so just getting a with thanks to at the end of all of those films is amazing. But also to get I've been invited to every premiere in all the London. Well, in fact, I've been invited to the LA premieres, and I said, can I go to the London one instead, because it's quite a long way to walk. And so I've got to see those. And with Guardians, obviously they were filming over here, so I got to go on sets a couple of times and meet them and climb aboard the spaceships and read the script before it. And it was just unbelievable. So when I went to see Guardians, red carpet in Leicester Square, London, the first one, and it was so exciting. And there were all these really famous people, you know, and got inside and watched the movie and loved it. And there was just this weird sense. There was all sorts of things appearing on screen, like Rocket and Star-Lord. And I was going, yeah, but, you know, all I've done is I've just been custodian of those characters for a while, but it's still really exciting to see them for real. And then they started to do things like, you know, Nowhere, which I had invented. And I went, oh my God, that's like the inside of my head. That's an extraordinary thing. And actually the people at Marvel, God bless their cotton socks, the bastards hadn't told me that I got a screen credit. So I was sitting there, I always say and watch the credits. And I was watching the credits going, oh, that was just great. That's my name. That's my name. So yeah, phenomenal experience. And Chris Pratt's very tall.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
The actors are going to be smaller in real life.
So many of them are tiny people.
Exactly. And I walked onto. I was introduced to him. He was lovely, and to Dave Bautista, who is lovely and the biggest human being I've ever met, and Zoe Saldana, and they were all like, "You're really tall people." But you're meant to both the actors, I suppose. Anyway, it was great. It was great.
I rarely will have this opportunity again. I have to ask. When you have Rocket's dialogue in your run, he has this jagged speech bubble. What was your idea for how he sounded? Was it that like he doesn't have vocal cords, so it's really like horrible? Like what was the sound?
You mean
because
Groot, yeah, you mean Groot?
Oh no, well, as I recall.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, no, okay.
Well, well, yeah, no. I mean, like Groot. I'm not even gonna ask how he works. I'm more like. For Rocket, you know, he clearly is articulate, he speaks, but he had this like jagged speech bubble around.
Yeah.
Thing.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. I think they've done a pretty good job of it. What I really wanted was the idea of it being having that kind of snarl to it all the time. So
okay.
It was like. And it doesn't happen very often, but when have you ever seen those like funny videos of dogs or cats that can say a few words?
Yes.
They're not really saying words, but they're making noises that sound like real words. And I thought that's how he would talk.
Okay, that's how I thought it was, yeah.
In the same way that obviously Groot apparently says, I am Groot all the time. But he doesn't, but that's just what we hear because there's all the subtle modulations of his language, which means it's actually translatable. So right. Yeah, there was that weird thing. So, but I think from the movie's point of view, they've got it down because it's part of that. It's more his personality than what his voice sounds like. Although Bradley's fantastic at it. But
I agree. Well, in the cartoon and in one of the video games, I think he's Australian.
Yeah,
and then.
Well, you know that's fine.
I was like, well, I'm like, okay. I don't know if I got Aussie from the depiction, but okay. Yeah. But I dig. Well,
in my head, of course, they're all British,
right?
I did that once actually. I did that. I was at a Games Day event in America. I think it was. I can't remember what it was. A big event and obviously that's all Warhammer, and I'm loving the Warhammer. And they asked me to do a reading of my latest Warhammer novel. So I went in front of this big audience and I stood up and I read this chapter. It was an unpublished, you know, here's an advanced preview of the next bit. I read it. At the end, everybody loved it. Huge round of applause. It was fantastic. And it was like lovely, fantastic. And I walked off stage and walked out the hall, and there were people getting up and leaving, and there was these two guys, and they obviously didn't know I could hear them as I walked past, and one of them said to the other, and I won't do the American accent, but with an American accent, obviously because they were American. One said, "Oh, that was just great. That was just fantastic." And the other guy, "Yeah, it was really, really good." He goes, "But wasn't it weird hearing it in a British accent?" I went, and I thought, it's written in a British accent,
right? Yeah, the only English work that I have to assume is like written in an American accent is Judge Dredd.
Yes, I always presume that too. Yeah.
How'd you like the Dredd movie? Just out of curiosity.
Which one?
I'll go with either. Normally, I go with Dredd, the last one, the Carl Urban one, because
the original, the Stallone one, because that's again, I've written Judge Dredd from time to time, but more particularly, I write a strip for the Judge Dredd magazine called Lawless, which is about a female judge, which is one of my favorite things to do. I really love doing that. So I like the Judge Dredd universe. The original Stallone movie was such a big deal when it came out, and so much of it looked fantastic.
Yes,
but it just kind of missed the point of what it was supposed to be and what was supposed to happen in it. In fact, I think Demolition Man is a more successful Judge Dredd movie than Judge Dredd.
Yes, completely. Well, it gets the parody down.
But the second one, Alex Allen, wasn't it? Even though it was more contained and sort of limited, I just thought captured the spirit brilliantly, and it has some extraordinary moments in it. And if you're a fan of that and you haven't now gone and watched Devs, the show that Garland did for the BBC a few months ago, which is not action orientated, but it's near future SF in the weirdest way. Superb television. He's a very talented guy. So yes, for content, the second one definitely. But I did like seeing the Hammerstein robot and stuff in the first one. Man,
that robot was well. That's Terminator speaking. I was like, that's really cool. Like. Yeah, and the suit is more in line with the comics. Like I just there's a lot of visuals that I enjoy from the first one.
Yeah.
But then he starts talking, and you're like,
Yeah, and what they tried to do is they tried to take the best bits of about 4 or 5 of the strip stories and make a cohesive story out of it, which didn't work. They could have stuck to one of them because each bit they visualize well. But anyway,
Max von Sydow's in that. He's good. But yeah, so. Dan, thank you so much for hanging out and talking with us. Again, to reiterate, your career is long, illustrious, and incredible. We thank you for your service. but listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't checked out Rye, go check it out now because it's available through your local comic book store, and I believe it's also
go and order it.
And
go and order the trade paperback because trade paperback of the first as well. Yeah, that's
right. Yeah, and the new one's what August
for both, so you can place your orders now.
Yeah, I will say it's a really cool issue. I read it the other day. Check it out. But Dan, thank you so much for hanging out and chat with us. Where can they find more of your work? Like, where can they find more from you?
Well, I that's not an easy question. I was on Twitter for the longest time, and I found Twitter just ultimately very off-putting. So I've started Instagramming, which is very sporadic because I'm just working all the time. And I also, weirdly, I use Facebook because that's like a dinosaur. But I use Facebook, and for years and years and years, I've had 2 Facebook pages simply because I like to be a person talking to people rather than a public figure, as they call it. Right. But both of them have now maxed out with their maximum number of friends. So I'm going to very soon. I'm going to convert one of them into a public figure page where I can actually have a lot more people come in and try and do things on it where I, come along and talk and answer questions and stuff like that. But if you go to either of those places, even if you're not a friend on Facebook, you can find me. I'm either Dan Abnett or Daniel Abnett because you can't have the same name twice.
Yeah.
But you can message me through that. I always check my message lists in terms of messages from non-friends and answer whatever I can. So those are probably the easiest places to find me.
Right. I'll put links in the description, but check them all out, and we'll see you guys next time. Dan, thanks so much for being here.
Having me. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.